Pope Francis in Africa. The Holy Father touches down in Madagascar for the second leg of his African journey. We'll have a report. Hurricane Dorian. The storm hits the southern east coast of the U.S. as aid efforts continue in the Bahamas. The nuns. The Democratic National Committee says their largest religious group are the ones who don't consider themselves members of any religion. We'll talk with one Democrat who points out the flaws in that claim. And sports in the Holy See. We'll talk to a member of the Vatican Athletics team ahead of Rome's half marathon. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, September 6, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Pope Francis touches down in Madagascar for a visit to the giant African island. He's coming face to face with extreme poverty. The Holy Father was met at the airport by the country's president and a group of young singers. The Pope made his way down the red carpet with armed guards lining the path. He climbed into the Pope-mobile for a ride into the city of Antananarivo. Madagascar is the world's fourth largest island. There are over 25 million people living there from 18 different ethnic groups.
Non so un atto de reconciliação ou a paz entendida como ausência de conflito.
Earlier today, the Pope celebrated Mass with an estimated 60,000 people in a rainy Mozambique. He urged the country to continue on the path of post-Civil War reconciliation. The country's civil war ended in 1992 after an estimated 1 million people were killed. Joining me now by Skype from Madagascar with his analysis of the Pope's visit is Jude Atemanke, editor for the French desk for ASI Africa. Jude, welcome in. Thank you very much for joining us. The Pope is there in Madagascar, one of Africa's poorest nations. The World Food Program estimates more than 90% of its 25 million people live on less than $2 per day. What message will the Pope have for the people there in Madagascar?
Thank you very much for having me. It's a message of hope that Pope Francis brings to the people of Madagascar. And right from his arrival today, we could see that people with lots and lots of expectations from the Holy Father Pope Francis. I spoke to some of the Malagasy people on my way to the airport today, and the message remained the same. Some of them could really be shouting to me. They say it in Malagasy, that is Pamafi Fiandanana, meaning hope. And of course, Pope Francis, when he finally came out, you could see tears from the eyes of the Christians. And one of them was talking to me. He said, Jude, thank you for coming to cover this very important visit of Pope Francis. I have just one plea. It has been 3 years today that I don't have a job, and I'm taking just one particular Mass intention to the Holy Mass on Sunday with the Holy Father, that I should finally get a job and be able to take care of my family, to be able to take care of my parents. That really touched me, and I believe it is that message of hope that Pope Francis is bringing to the people of Madagascar.
Mauritius will be the last stop of his trip. It's a country known for its multiculturalism. What will Pope Francis emphasize while he's there?
Yeah, for the Mauritius lap of Pope Francis, that will be another important moment of the Holy Father's visit. But then the most important point will be, of course, to bring peace. And during his visit in Mauritius, when we look at the program, it tells you what the expectations of the Christians out there in Mauritius. They are expecting Pope Francis to bring the message of peace through the gospel that he will preach out there in Mauritius.
Today, there are more than 230 million Catholics on the continent of Africa. How does the Holy Father's visit signal the importance of the connection between African cultural values and the values of the Catholic Church?
You know, when we talk about the cultural values in Africa, we go back to the Vatican II Council. whereby the church in Africa had several responsibilities, and of course, among them inculcating some of that aspects of our culture into the liturgy, into the church. And that is not different from this visit of Pope Francis to the African continent. We see the culture of the Africans being displayed during very, very important moments of this particular visit, during the Eucharistic celebrations, during the welcoming ceremonies. We see the culture of the people. Today, for example, in Madagascar, we had this special dressing of the little flower girl and the little flower boy that represented the culture of the Malagasy people. We had that same scenario at the level of Madagascar, for Mozambique, and I hope it won't be different at the level of Mauritius, given that Africans pay great attention to their culture, and with the Catholic Church implanted strongly in Africa, we use the opportunity to also show some of the good aspects of our culture that is worth emulating.
Okay, well, of course, we with EWTN and all of our EWTN branches will continue to follow Pope Francis as he continues his trip to Africa. Jude Atemanke, editor for the French desk for Aussie Africa, thanks so much for talking with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
President Donald Trump believes there's an opportunity for a bipartisan immigration deal. He tweeted today about DACA, the program that prevents young, undocumented immigrants from getting deported. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports.
Wyatt, President Trump ended DACA 2 years ago, but that action has faced challenges in lower courts. The president hopes the Supreme Court will rule in his favor. This impacts immigrants known as Dreamers who have been living in the U.S. for years but face an uncertain future. The highest court in the land likely won't make a decision about DACA and the fate of more than 700,000 undocumented immigrants living in the U.S. until next year. But President Trump is going after his predecessor's immigration policy today. Tweeting, President Obama never had the legal right to sign DACA, and he indicated so at the time of signing. But in any event, how can he have the right to sign and I don't have the right to unsigned? DACA will be going before the Supreme Court. Rest assured that if the Supreme Court does what all say it must based on the law, a bipartisan deal will be made to the benefit of all. The president moved to end DACA in 2017 while saying he wanted to assist the undocumented immigrants who benefited from the program known as Dreamers.
I have a love for these people, and hopefully now Congress will be able to help them and do it properly.
As Democrats call for a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers, the president has demanded funding for a U.S. southern border wall. Aide Gatan with the Libre Initiative says Dreamers shouldn't be used as political pawns.
The communities that they're in and that they serve are currently facing a lot of uncertainty.
He says instead of waiting for the courts to sort out a DACA solution, President Trump and Congress should pass immigration reform that both parties can agree on.
We believe that a compromise where we both have a Dreamer solution and we have funds for border security can actually incentivize both parties to work together.
But the White House and Congress have been at odds over that compromise, and the differences over wall funding even led to a government shutdown earlier this year. When it comes to immigration reform, the Catholic Church teaches governments have a responsibility to protect their own people and enforce the law for the sake of the common good. But at the same time, it calls for welcoming the foreigner out of charity and respect. At the White House, Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Hurricane Dorian grazed the Carolina coast with screaming winds and heavy rain Thursday. Trees and power lines littered flooded streets in Charleston, South Carolina's historic downtown. Part of the roof of a church was blown off in the torrential winds and rain. At least 4 people were killed in the southeast, all in Florida and North Carolina, who died in falls or by electrocution. While Dorian largely spared the U.S., in the Bahamas, it's an entirely different story. U.S. Coast Guard teams have been helping the rescue efforts in the islands, pulling more than 200 people to safety so far. Those on the islands face a long road to recovery. The World Food Program estimates about 60,000 people may be in dire need of food relief. Officials said 30 people have been confirmed dead, but that number is likely to rise. Students and graduates from at least 5 Hong Kong schools formed human chains today. It was to raise awareness of the 4 remaining demands of protesters involved in months of demonstrations in the semi-autonomous Chinese territory. The continuing protests come 2 days after Hong Kong's leader, Carrie Lam, announced the government will formally withdraw a controversial extradition bill. Former President of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, has died at the age of 95. He was the first head of the government of Zimbabwe after its independence in 1980 until a coup in November of 2017. Mugabe's legacy was built by violence and oppression and an economic collapse in the country, forcing millions to flee. Zimbabwe's current president has declared Mugabe a national hero, the country's highest posthumous honor. Mugabe was raised Catholic and was one of the heads of state who traveled to the Vatican for the canonization of Pope John Paul II in 2014. He's seen here shaking hands with Pope Francis. Coming up, we'll talk about the latest in the controversy in the Diocese of Buffalo. A former faith outreach director for President Barack Obama is slamming members of his own party. He's responding to the Democratic National Committee, which states their largest religious group is the Nuns, spelled N-O-N-E-S. Those individuals don't consider themselves members of any organized religion. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us with the details. Jason?
Wyatt, Michael Ware led faith outreach for the winning 2012 Obama campaign. He blamed the losing 2016 Clinton campaign of political malpractice. That's because he said they ignored large numbers of religious voters. Now he's once again criticizing Democrats.
I hope they aren't confused about not just the state of the Democratic Party, but the state of the country.
Former President Obama aide Michael Ware calls a new Democratic resolution ridiculous. It says the party's largest religious group is the Nuns, the religiously unaffiliated. That includes people with some belief, as well as atheists and agnostics.
It only makes sense if you hold all of them together, and then you split up Christians, Catholics from Protestants, Black, Hispanic, and white Christians, you split them up.
It's true, however, more and more Americans are giving up religion. The Pew Research Center finds about a quarter of Americans claim no religious affiliation. And Bishop Robert Barron says for every one person entering the church, more than 6 are leaving.
Mostly unaffiliated are, maybe blandly indifferent to religion, or they've kind of drifted rather than stormed away from religion. And so that's a sign of hope, that we're not up against a fierce opponent at every turn.
In June, American bishops talked about what they can say to the nuns.
What I believe about Jesus Christ and the salvation that he has won for us through his passion, death, and resurrection, that he established a church to carry on that saving mission in the world, that it's God's will that I belong to that church in order to attain eternal life and salvation, and that church is the Catholic Church.
The Democratic resolution also accuses some of the faithful of a misplaced claim of religious liberty to justify discrimination. But presidential candidate and New Age author Marian Williamson says people of faith have a home in the Democratic Party, and they're needed if Democrats are going to win in 2020. Wyatt?
Correspondent Jason Calvi reporting from Capitol Hill. Thanks, Jason. The head of the Diocese of Buffalo is resisting calls to resign. It comes after his former secretary secretly recorded him discussing a priest's alleged sexual harassment of a seminarian. It's the second time that a key member of Bishop Richard Malone's staff has gone public with concerns about his handling of reports of clergy misconduct. It's the latest in the sex abuse scandal rocking the church in the U.S. Dr. Matthew Bunsen joins me now. Matthew is the executive editor of EWTN News. Matthew, welcome back. What did Bishop Malone say in this secretly recorded conversation, and why is it stirring up controversy?
Well, there are a couple things in these recordings that have gotten people really upset. The first is that he's very concerned about a case of sexual harassment that relates to a priest and a seminarian. The original accusation dates all the way back to November of last year, but here we are listening to recordings in March and elsewhere. No action was apparently being taken. And there seems concern about the implications should all of this become public. So it reinforces in the minds of a lot of people the lack of transparency, but also the accusations of inaction on the part of Bishop Malone and church leaders in the face not just of the sexual abuse crisis, but also of sexual harassment and problems that exist in seminaries across the United States.
As I say, this is the latest in a long-running scandal in Buffalo. What's the background here?
Well, the Diocese of Buffalo is a venerable one. It dates all the way back to 1847. So it's a diocese with a long and very rich history of delivering the faith, of bringing the faith to New York and beyond. That is heartbreaking then to so many people, especially in the face of the last 18 months or so, in which you've had massive allegations of cover-ups of priests who were not removed from ministry in the face of credible allegations. Last year, we had Siobhan O'Connor, the bishop's secretary, who made public allegations and documents seemingly making very clear that a cover-up had taken place, that inaction seemed to be the norm on the part of the diocese in handling abuse cases. Now we have also potential investigations on the part of authorities in New York State looking into this, the Attorney General. We also have RICO lawsuits. Now, those are lawsuits that are especially difficult for a diocese to face because of just, if for no other reason, the public relations side of that. Why? Because RICO is used against organizations like the mafia. So it is, to say safely, a public relations disaster. But more than that, it's a crippling blow, I think, to the credibility and claims of transparency on the part of church leaders.
So much originating from just one diocese in the U.S. Do you think this is indicative of wider problem in U.S. dioceses, archdioceses?
Well, we have Bishop Malone saying that he's not going to resign. All eyes are going to be asking that. They're going to be looking to Bishop resign. Is he going to resign as Bishop of Buffalo? That has a bleed-out effect across the state of New York. It also has a bleed-out effect across the dioceses and archdioceses of the U.S., which themselves now are facing investigations by attorneys general, state after state. We have in New York State the lifting of the statute of limitations for a year, so there are going to be more lawsuits. So we have those problems, but then we also have investigations that we need to have taking place into the seminaries of the United States. Are the reforms that were promised in the seminary system actually taking root? So there are a lot of questions facing the U.S. Church right now, and the bishops need to come forward and answer them forcefully.
This is so upsetting, I know, this whole situation to a lot of faithful Catholics, but it's so important that we talk about this and bring all this to the surface. Dr. Matthew Bunsen, Executive Editor for EWTN News. Thanks so much.
Good to be with you.
Up next, we'll speak to a member of the first sports association established in the Vatican about how the team mixes competition with faith, and a look inside St. Mary Major in Rome. For the first time, the Vatican's athletic team will be participating in Rome's half marathon later this month. Launched in January, Atletica Vaticana, or Vatican Athletics, is the first sports association established within the Holy See. The team is comprised of employees working at the Vatican. Athletes have participated in various races. Joining us now from Rome is Paul Weston, a member of the team and a professor at the Vatican Library. Paul, welcome in. The team's goal isn't just to win a half marathon. Participating in athletics also has a spiritual component. How do you incorporate both the athletic and the spirituality?
Well, to run is to feel free, to feel very light. It's a way of praying. It's the way of saying hello to everybody you meet in the morning when you're doing your workout. So it's just being sort of nice to other people, is trying to be a testimony of our faith, is just to bring our even our name, Atletica Vaticana, in Italy and in the world if we compete at an international level.
You mentioned prayer. Prayer is so important for what you guys do. Members of the team have written a prayer. I want to read part of it. Running with humility and passion is my prayer of praise to you, which I repeat even in the last endless 195 meters of the race of my life. So the team prays before each race. What has been the reaction by other teams when you guys get together and pray?
Well, they asked to join us, notwithstanding their faith. They repeatedly asked to have the text of the prayer to read before their competitions as well, which we of course are very happy to give.
And you're sort of, we've talked to members of the team and we've heard about how there's sort of a missionary aspect in terms of what you guys do. Can you expand a little bit on that? How do you guys sort of see yourself as missionaries, if you will?
Of course, my first duty is being a teacher of librarianship, so that's the first place in which I am a missionary. But in running, my idea of being a missionary is, for instance, helping if someone is not prepared to run. I'm trying to learn how to guide people who cannot see. And that is something which will help me to know myself better.
There is a big, diverse group that are members of the Vatican team. The youngest member of the team is 19 years old, and you yourself are the oldest. Now, Paul, I won't ask you your age, so you don't have to state that, but what's your secret to staying in shape?
My secret, I'm 63, by the way. My secret is my family. It's a very nice place to stay. They're very supportive. My wife's very patient when I go training. Then my life, my students, they are part of my secret, if you want. And then, of course, there's a great passion for what I do. Fortunately, I'm one of those who can say that has done in life what he has wanted to do, which is a great pleasure, of course, and great responsibility too, because then, of course, you're going to be examined for that.
Well, it's always so interesting to hear about the Vatican Athletic team and, of course, to talk to members of the team, hear their own personal experience. So we're very appreciative of the fact that you came on and talked with us today. Paul Weston, a member of the Atletica Vaticana team, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, too. It was very nice to make your acquaintance. Good luck.
And, of course, we wish the Vatican team all the best in the upcoming half marathon. And with that, we conclude our newscast for tonight. We thank you for watching. We leave you tonight with a look inside the Basilica of St. Mary Major in Rome. Our EWTN Vaticano team recently spent time there ahead of Sunday's celebration of the birthday of the Virgin Mary. Vaticano will air it at 2 p.m. Eastern this Sunday on EWTN. Good night and God bless.